Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 12, Episode 115. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here on this Wednesday show. Dave, how you doing?
Doing good. Right here in the slap dab in the middle of the week, and right around 15 days until the 2022 NFL draft gets underway. I'm trying to cram in as much tape as I possibly can at this point, and go over all those kind of deep dive stats that I like to look at. And obviously excited about you firing back up the What the Steelers Look For series that we'll talk a little bit about I think later on in this show as well too. So it's about that time, Alex.
Yeah, you and me both. Everyone trying to cram here to learn as much as possible to get ready for the draft, which is just over 2 weeks away. A little bit later in the show, as we mentioned last week, we'll have Owen Straley and Devin Jackson joining us as a Depot Roundtable, kind of part 3 of that series, talking quarterback, but also talking wide receivers and defensive backs and super sleepers in this year's draft. So about an hour conversation between those two guys and Dave and myself. And so looking forward to you guys listening and getting your feedback on that. Before we do that, though, Dave, a couple of things to get to Steelers news-wise. Of course, still talking and thinking about Dwayne Haskins and his death over the weekend. Still been so many great stories and memorials and people tweeting and talking about him as a person, what he meant to him and to the community, and just all those lives that he impacted. I do want to mention the Haskins family has announced and issued a statement about some of the funeral services being held for Haskins. There are going to be multiple of them. One Saturday, April 23rd in New Jersey. Then there'll be one in Maryland on Sunday, April 24th, the following day, where Haskins attended high school. His high school, by the way, is retiring his jersey number. And so just wanted to keep you up to date on some of the latest Haskins news.
Yeah, and also it sounds, I don't think the Steelers have confirmed this, but a Darren M. Haynes from WUSA 9 in, I think, Washington, D.C. has tweeted and reported that the Steelers plan to have some sort, I guess, service reportedly on April 22nd. So as you mentioned, the family funeral, it sounds like it's going to be at Christ Church in Rockaway Township, New Jersey on the 23rd. The vigil at his old high school in Potomac, Maryland on the 24th. And then it sounds like the Steelers have something that they're doing, I guess, some sort of memorial or something like that on April 22nd. And once again, I don't think the Steelers have announced anything on that yet, but boy, there sure is a lot. I think Ohio State had a little bit of a vigil, I guess, outside the stadium there with former players and fans yesterday, and obviously touched a lot of lives, and going to continue to be a topic of discussion, I think, for quite a while now. And
Sure.
As far as the FHP investigation on that Florida Highway Patrol, it sounds like it's going to be probably towards the end of 90 days or so, right around in there, before we probably learn more definite details. I know there's a lot of stuff on, Twitter and social media and all now about, quote unquote reports or sources and all like that. And, all I would advise everybody is, kind of be careful with that stuff, that's floating around out there. The let the due process be just that, the due process, and we'll see what the reports or what the investigations show after the fact there. But I think the focus right now should remain on just losing the individual tragically the way they did this past Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we'll refrain from talking about the specifics of any potential, explanation for what happened Saturday until the official report comes out in the next 3 months or so. And if the Steelers do announce any official memorial services or any sort of other type vigil like what Ohio State held, we'll certainly pass along that information if and when it becomes official. So that is the latest on Dwayne Haskins. Dave, some other Steelers news as well. J.C. Hassenauer, Steelers center guard, officially signing his exclusive rights tender for the 2022 season yesterday, worth $895,000 this year. So that was just a formality. He basically had to sign it, or if he didn't, he'd have to sit out the entire season, which of course he was not going to do. So J.C. Hassenauer officially signing his contract, though.
Yeah, that no surprise. Normally those exclusive guys sign a little bit earlier, but we've seen in the past it kind of take why it takes so long. I don't have a great answer for, other than maybe thinking that maybe the player is hoping the team will come to him and maybe do maybe a longer term deal, or maybe the player think that potentially. I don't know. So I don't know the reason why some of these exclusive rights free agents take so long, because they are just that. They are exclusive rights players. So you can tender the player at the minimum, and the player has to essentially accept the deal. Maybe that's a question for Joe Corey down the line next time we add that to the long list of why do exclusive rights players not just run up right away and sign those tender offers there. Now, I think at this point, really, I think Marcus Allen, I think, is the only guy that we're waiting on, right? And he's got a restricted free agent tender that I think he's hanging on to because obviously I think Robert Spillane has signed his restricted tender at this point, and I think Marcus Allen is the only one I don't think we know for sure whether or not he has signed his yet.
Yeah, I have not seen anything official on that, but I'm sure he'll have to sign it at some point, or likely to sign it, because no other team's coming calling for that contract or for that player.
Right. No reason it takes, and there's a cutoff date. I think it's like April, is it 21st or 22nd? Somewhere along that lines is the deadline for restricted free agents to sign offer sheets with other teams. So that's more of a reason why, you see these restricted players kind of wait, is they want to see if they're, they might get an offer sheet from another team, and that of course the team like the Steelers that issued the tender would then have the right to, either match or whatever, moving forward there. But I don't think we have to. I would be surprised at this point if Marcus Allen did get an offer sheet from another team this late in the process. So because of that, I would expect probably at any time we get the report that he has signed his restricted tender.
Right, that'll just be a matter of time. Also, fifth-year options being picked up by teams. Like Noah Fant, Seattle picked up his fifth-year option, obviously getting traded over as part of that Russell Wilson deal. That deadline, what's it, May 2nd? What's the deadline on fifth-year option?
Yeah, like the May 2nd or 3rd, right around in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, we'll wait and see what happens with Devin Bush. Do not anticipate that option being picked up, but do want to make mention that the teams are starting to do that. And so Fant was the first. I'm sure several other names will follow in the next couple days and weeks.
Right.
A little bit of fun Steelers news here. XFL is returning in February of 2023, and 8 head coaches of that restarted league that unfortunately got shut down in COVID back in March of 2020. So the league's announced that the new 8 head coaches, and 2 of them are former Steelers, and Hines Ward and Rod Woodson. So don't know the teams they'll be coaching, don't know any information beyond the 8 names that were listed. And so beyond Ward and Woodson, there were names like Wade Phillips and Bob Stoops, Anthony Becht, and others, but pretty cool to see Ward and Woodson become head coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you put football on the television, I'll probably watch it. So, and he obviously got the USFL firing up pretty soon here.
This weekend, actually.
Yeah, this weekend here. So, what'd you think about the measurement, article on the USFL with them doing the chip in the ball and all like that? That's been a hot button for me for a long time. So I'm glad to see that. And look, hopefully some of these, and some of these leagues with some of these rules that they have, the NFL does take a hard look at it, right? And I think that's definitely one of them, because I think at this point we should be able to move past 2 sticks in a chain.
Yeah, I'm all for the technology, anything to get things more accurate and to do it quicker, I'm in favor of. But I've never thought the chip in the football is like the miracle worker that people think it's going to be in terms of accuracy, in terms of reliability, and just some of the weird quirks that could happen. I think there's a lot of bugs that have to get worked out, but it is good to kind of use the USFL as kind of the feeder test league to see how some of those rule changes and technology type things, will work out.
Okay.
And so that is the news on the XFL. Again, they're going to play in February of 2023. And the USFL will start this Friday. The Maulers are playing, I think it's Tampa Bay, but all those games are going to be held in Birmingham the first year. So there won't be anything local, including in Pittsburgh. Dave, do also want to mention the quarterback visits.
We do have now a statement from, looks like Dwayne Haskins' wife here that the Steelers are putting out here, saying that they will be holding a celebration of Dwayne's life on Friday, April 22nd at the Allegheny Center Alliance Church in Pittsburgh, PA. We invite friends and teammates, coaches, and those who want to pay their respects to Dwayne to a visitation from 10 to 11 a.m., which will be followed by a celebration of life service from 11 a.m. To 1 p.m. So we do now have confirmation that Friday, April the 22nd, kind of the kind of the local service, if you will, in Pittsburgh for Dwayne Haskins.
Okay, yeah, that's great information to know. So I just saw that statement there out there on Haskins. So again, that's April 22nd.
Right.
Dave, to look at the NFL draft, some of the pre-draft visitors that are coming in, no new names that haven't already been reported, but some dates official according to NFL Network's Ian Rappaport. Nevada quarterback Carson Strong visiting the Steelers today, while Ole Miss quarterback Matt Corral visit the Steelers tomorrow on Thursday. So again, those names have been reported, but the dates had not been. So just a bit of housekeeping there, but just shows the obvious interest in the position and learning about this whole quarterback class as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're bringing them all in, right? For sure. If I would have picked a name that maybe they wouldn't have brought in, it probably would have been, maybe Carson Strong, but, obviously had Mike Sullivan, and, maybe it's a good reason to bring him in because they weren't actually at that pro day in Reno there. Mike Sullivan was there, but I think that was it. So, I guess the bigger question, I think we got some sort of email about this and people wondering, can you see this team drafting a quarterback not in the first round, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't like to say no to a lot of things when it comes to the draft, and it's just kind of natural unpredictability. So I think it's possible to see something in round 2 or even maybe that move up into the late first round. Though I don't know exactly how that would work, and that'd be a pretty heavy move to go up. But again, I don't want to say no to that either. I would just say first or second round. If you get past the second round, then there's really no reason to draft a quarterback.
Right. At that point, I would wait and see if you got a guy like Chris Oladuncan or something like that. Maybe you can add to the room, but we did obviously see the Steelers a few years ago drafted Josh Dobbs later in the draft and turn around a year later and drafted, Mason Rudolph. So I feel comfortable in saying that this team's obviously going to draft a quarterback this year, but my own bias, and I believe yours as well too, is, man, either get one in the first round or move on, go from there.
Right, because even the second round quarterback, the success rate's lower. It's just a weirder feel like, is this really the franchise guy, or is this a guy that we like but we didn't love enough to obviously take in the first round? It's just kind of an awkward, there's been some success there, but really to me it's first round or bust. So we'll see what happens. But again, I don't want to rule anything out because this draft and this quarterback class in particular this year is, as our conversations have shown, really unpredictable.
What would you put on a percentage chance of this team not drafting a quarterback at all?
Low. It's hard to put a particular number on it, but I would say
less than 1%.
Well, I mean, 1% is basically 0% to me. But I mean, it'd be like probably about 10% chance they don't come away with a quarterback at some round.
Yeah, I'll be quite shocked.
Yeah, me as well. Dave, to transition from quarterbacks to the guys the quarterbacks throw to, the wide receivers, as you mentioned, are what they look for. Studies have returned. Wide receivers going up today. Kind of teased this during Monday's episode about the four receivers who checked every single box in the Steelers threshold, kind of what they look for when it comes to drafting here. And so those four receivers are, I mentioned Christian Watson. On Monday, I'll read off the other three names: Bo Melton, Jalen Naylor, and Braylon Sanders, checking every single box in terms of the Steelers threshold. You can read that whole article on SteelersDepot.com. Three other receivers missed in just one category: Kevin Austin Jr., Khalil Shakir, and Jalen Tolbert. That's Austin from Notre Dame, Shakir from Boise State, Tolbert from South Alabama. Austin, Tolbert not making it because they did not bench, and Shakir missing out because of a slower three-cone time. So interesting list of names there. Maybe not household names overall. Watson's gaining around one buzz. Other guys are more day two, day three candidates, but I think interesting names of the Steelers receivers there.
Yeah, one name, and I think we talked about the other day, right? Danny Gray. What was the exact reason why a guy like Danny Gray didn't make it?
I'll have to look at my notes here. It's not. I don't have that on hand right now.
Hand size, or was it something?
No, I don't think it was hand size. It was short shuttle three cone, and he did not bench.
Okay.
So missed in two that he tested, and I think that's why, at least. And then I know he did not bench.
Okay.
So, and do you have any particular favorites or any guys that you're even more interested in of that list of seven? Melton, Nayland, Sanders, Watson, Austin, Shakir, and Tolbert.
I mean, I think Tolbert and Melton are two guys that are intriguing. That I've watched, I think, more of Tolbert early on in this process, and not so much on Melton on this. But Melton's more of a, I don't know, he's more of I guess a round four later guy. I would kind of venture a guess on, right?
Yeah, I think there's a chance he could sneak into late day two. I mean, receivers become unpredictable because there's different flavors, but he's a really athletic guy that's got a lot of burst and separation at the top of his route. Thought he had a nice Senior Bowl week overall. Didn't play on some great Rutgers team, but just a really quick twitch guy with the ability to separate. And to me, the best receiver is an open receiver, and Melton's a guy that to me knows how to get open.
Right. And boy, you look at the short shuttle and the three code time on him, man. Did you track down any Rutgers Pro Day info?
I think they had someone there. I don't know if I confirmed who it was. I have to go back to my tracker. But if there was someone, there would have been just a scout.
Okay. You don't think it was a position coach then?
Not that I'm aware. I mean, I could always have missed something, but I don't believe so. Sanders, interesting. I mean, Tolbert and Sanders, even Naylor, have kind of been like the big play guys with their really gaudy yards per catch numbers in college. Sanders only caught, I think, like 60 career passes in his whole 4-year career at Ole Miss, but averaged 20 yards a catch and didn't run a 4.3 or something like that. Ran 4.48, but just a smooth guy, long strider, real feast or famine guy that tracks the ball well. Made some really acrobatic catches, being able to go up and get the football one against Alabama, like a crazy one-handed toe tapping grab along the left sideline. Tolbert's kind of that James Washington mold of being that vertical threat without having the 4.3 type of speed, but made some big plays with South Alabama. Austin is a classic height, weight, speed guy that finally broke out this past year. Had some off-field issues, got suspended by the team, but that's kind of some people will compare him to Martavis Bryant. My comp was Deion Kane, just kind of that classic height, weight, speed type of receiver.
And I know a lot of people will start wondering about some of these other, like Sky Moore, and Wendell Robinson and all like that. But those guys, I would assume that mostly height and weight were two big misses for them.
Yeah, with Moore, it was height because he's under 5'10", and the threshold is 5'10". He's 5'9". So that was it on Moore. Was there anything else? It was also in the agility drills, short shuttle three cone. That tripped up a lot of guys. He tested, I believe, but did not hit the threshold there. Who's the other name you mentioned?
Wendell Robinson out of Kentucky.
Yeah, he missed a ton of stuff. Height, weight, bench, which he did not participate in. The agility drills he did not participate in, and missed in the broad jump as well. So again, he's kind of been more of that running back receiver, a little more positionless type of guy, but he missed in a lot of categories.
All right. I always love these too, and also my terrible take. I'm going to write a little bit more about this either today or tomorrow. Just continually reminding people how important these all-star games are, right? Because it seems like every year, 4 or 5 of these draft picks are players that were invited to the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, or the NFLPA Bowl. Now, obviously, COVID interrupted a lot of this these last few years and all. But you just go back and look at last year, right? What was 5 or 6 guys? What I forget exactly what the only 2 really weren't, and they were underclassmen, right? In Pat Fryermuth and Kendrick Green were both underclassmen. The other draft picks last year: Najee Harris, Dan Moore Jr., Buddy Johnson, Isaiah Loudermilk, Quincy Roche, Trey Norwood, and even punter Presley Harvin the third, because I think he was a NFLPA bowl invite there. I mean, all those guys, came out of the All-Star games. Now, probably the number a little bit higher because of COVID, right? Last year. So that number probably inflated a little bit there because and obviously the Steelers had a few more draft picks than they normally do. But I mean, even going back to 2020, you got guys like Chase Claypool, Alex Highsmith, Kevin Dotson, Antoine Brooks Jr., Carlos Davis. All those guys were college All-Star games. And then you go back even further past there. Obviously the Steelers, Devin Bush in 2019 was was an underclassman. I think Deontay Johnson was as well too. But you look at a lot of those other guys that they drafted there, a lot of all-star guy games in there. So the further we get deeper, or the deeper we get it, further we get into this process, I think people lose sight of the fact that, man, if you're going to attach a potential draft pick to the Steelers in some of these mock drafts, especially if they're a senior, man, they better have gone to the combine, and they there's a good chance that they probably needed to participate in one of those three all-star games. Now, as far as underclassmen goes, I think generally, and it's probably universal or global when it comes to other teams as well too. Normally, those guys come in the first 3 or 4 rounds of the draft for obvious reasons there. And so I think that's just an important element of this, that when putting together your final mocks here, man, don't forget about those all-star games.
Yeah, they're really important. I mean, it does cover a pretty wide scope of players, but certainly it's something you want to keep in mind. What's interesting to me is that Pittsburgh usually seems to prioritize underclassmen and youth, especially the top of the draft, those first 2 to 3 picks. And there are still a large number of underclassmen who declared this year, but it's just an older draft class in general because of the super seniors, because of COVID, because of the expanded eligibility rules that allowed a lot of guys to go back to school for 2021, and guys who didn't have a full 2020 season, maybe didn't play at all in 2020. And so I wonder how Pittsburgh will approach that, because will they look for the few guys who are 21, 22, because this class is full of guys who are 23, 24 years old?
That's a good question. How much COVID has kind of interrupted these classes per se. So it will be interesting to see if they maybe shy away from the older guys, the much older guys, I guess would be how you kind of classify a lot of these guys in this class, right?
Yeah, the super seniors, the 5th-year guys. Okay. Now, I don't think it's going to impact it for quarterback, because that's a position where obviously a guy who could play into his mid has been proved, late 30s. So that's a guy you're going to expect to have for 10 years, whether the guy's 21 or 24. But I think for other positions, for whatever, safety, receiver, et cetera, they like the guys who are 21, 22, especially at the top, because they feel like when they pay that second contract, that guy's still only 25, 26 years old, and you still get that full second contract out of him. He's 27, 28. Then you wonder, are we going to pay him again? Because if you pay him again and he gets into his 30s, is he going to produce diminishing returns? And so I think Pittsburgh really likes to have those guys early so they can pay that second deal at a reasonable age.
Yeah, look, and you would probably bet the same way here too. At least one of the first 3 picks the team has is probably going to be an underclassman this year, because of just all the things that you said right there, and probably wouldn't be super shocking if 2 of them,
Right. And now it's who are those names going to be
right.
Is interesting, because it may not be a quarterback, because Howell is technically an underclassman. I guess he is an underclassman, and Corral is as well, but you have some seniors in that group, whether that's Pickett or Ritter or Willis, and those guys were all seniors. So it'll be interesting for sure.
Mm-hmm.
One other receiver note I wanted to mention, I thought that was interesting, was a good feature piece I just kind of stumbled across the other day on Clemson wide receiver Justin Ross. And we mentioned Ross early in the pro day process because at the Tigers pro day, you had Tomlin, Colbert, also Frisman Jackson working out. Justin Ross there. He's a really interesting guy. He had a great first 2 years at Clemson, had some big numbers with Trevor Lawrence and for that Tigers potent offense, and then got diagnosed with a spinal injury.
Was it
I don't think it was stenosis.
Oh.
It was some fusion. I need Dr. Mel here as a lifeline here. There was a particular name for the condition, but needed a very uncommon spinal fusion surgery. And that's going to obviously scare a lot of teams off. He missed the entire 2020 season, came back in 2021, didn't put up great numbers, didn't look as productive and as healthy as he did. Obviously, prior to the injury, his pro day testing numbers overall were pretty weak. But what's interesting there is the doctor who performed the surgery on Ross is the Steelers team neurosurgeon who performed, for example, the Ryan Shazier spinal stabilization surgery back in 2017. So there's a pretty close relationship there between the Pittsburgh doctor and Justin Ross. So I wonder if having that connection there is going to make Pittsburgh feel more comfortable because they're going to have the best insight and analysis possible into the Ross injury history and the surgery and the outlook because it's one of their team doctors who did it.
Very interesting indeed. And where he's being gauged, middle rounds right now, I think I saw something on Dane Brugler somewhere between 4th and 5th round. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was potential for day 2 beginning this process, but when you had the pretty weak testing, I think he ran in the 4.5s, had a 31-inch vertical, and he'll be off some teams' boards entirely because it's a that injury itself is scary. I think the doctor who performed it said he's the only known, basically soon-to-be professional football player who's had this injury and is still playing. So this probably should have been a career ender, but they found a way to do it and for him to play. What was happening was prior to the surgery, he was getting a lot of stingers, they were calling, a lot of numbness, a lot of weird stuff going on, and they investigated it further and realized he had this condition. But it's interesting. I mean, Pittsburgh, I would assume, still has him on their board because they sent Frisman Jackson to work him out at the pro day. So I just think the connection there, because it's going to be about comfort in the medical evaluation with Justin Ross. And when your team doctor is the guy that did the surgery, you can talk to him more easily than any other team could do. I just wonder if that's going to make Pittsburgh more comfortable with where he's at medically.
Boy, you look at his RAS score though, man. 2.64, I think, from Math Bomb. That's not great at all there. So I would venture a guess that medical and testing definitely has him out of the first. Obviously the Steelers don't have a 5th round draft pick right now. He's more of to me, if the Steelers were going to go that route, it'd be a 6th or a 7th round type of guy.
Yeah, I think day 3 is where he's going to go. Like I said, probably off some teams' boards entirely. But I just saw that information about who performed the surgery and thought that was interesting. That a note about Clemson receiver Justin Ross.
All right, connecting dots.
Yep, that's what we do. All right, Dave, let's take a break here and come back with our draft roundtable discussion with Owen Straley and Devin Jackson, talking quarterback, talking some of those receivers, talking defensive backs as well. So we'll take a pause and come back. And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. And as promised, we are finishing up our Steelers Depot draft roundtable after having several of the guys on last week. Wanted to finish things out here with a couple of great valued members of the Steelers Depot team. That is Owen Straley and Devin Jackson. You can follow Devin on Twitter at @RealD_Jackson. Be sure to follow Owen on Twitter at OwenStraley21. So appreciate their work and the draft profiles and all the other things they've been doing this year. So appreciate you guys being on the show. Devin, how you doing?
Doing well. Just trying to start to wrap a bow on this class since it's only a few weeks left. Before we get to draft days, about 2 weeks away. So just trying to wrap a bow on all these prospects and trying to finalize these 2022 players.
Definitely. 15 days away, April 28th, day 1 of the 2022 NFL draft. Owen, how are you?
Yeah, doing pretty good. Similar to Devin, just kind of trying to figure out how to finish up evaluating this cornerback class, looking at more of the late round guys at this rate.
Yeah, and corner, probably a later round consideration for Pittsburgh. Safety, certainly something I want to talk about today. But Dave, I'll kind of kick it to you. Do you want to kind of branch off the quarterback conversation that we had? I certainly want to spend a lot of time today on the defensive side of the football because we focus so much on the quarterbacks, but I know you probably had a couple of outstanding questions about the quarterback class for Owen and Devin.
Yeah, look, and obviously, both Devin and Owen, I know at this point have a pretty good idea about the top 5 quarterbacks in question, if you will, there, and just throughout the process, I don't know overall how much time they probably spent on it, but where are they at right now on this quarterback class, and especially when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, which way have they gone? Just kind of get an overview from both guys on where they are, and maybe some guys that maybe have come up throughout the process of their tape study, or maybe some that have gone the other way. Anybody want to take it? Devin, you want to take it first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Last time I was on, or we talked about quarterbacks, I think it was before the Senior Bowl. It was pretty high on Malik Willis even at that point, and he's kind of remained QB1 for me kind of over the last few months, even before the Senior Bowl happened. I just think there's still a long way to go for him in terms of quarterback development, but just the skill set he has, the unique plays he makes out of structure, and just the plays that he makes that no other quarterback can make in this class, I think is what's been able to stick by me. So for me, Willis has kind of remained at the top. Carson Strong, he still remains at 2 for me. And I understand he has had the greatest pre-draft process, but I just like his ability to control at the line of scrimmage, his ability to hit all corners of the field and be able to drive on footballs across the middle. And just what he's able to see with his eyes and whatnot, manipulate defenses. So those two have still kind of stay at the top for me. But I have grown to like Desmond Ridder a little bit more than I did on my initial watch. And I just think, especially for the Steelers, sake, I know they want Malik Willis and obviously one on the building, but we know that Willis is probably going to go in the top 5, top 6. At this point of the draft. So Ritter's someone is someone that intrigues me because I do think, with him, there's a little bit of, obviously the athleticism, but also some of what he's able to do with his mind and be able to see defenses and be aggressive down the field and attack defenses in the deep thirds of the field. It's something that I've kind of grown to be impressed with. I thought he had somewhat of an up and down Senior Bowl, and but I think people have really started to turn on Desmond Ridder potentially going in the first round. And while I don't have a first round grade on Ridder, I do like him. I think a little bit more than some people who don't like him, and I just like what he can bring to the table from a skill set perspective and be able to make plays off structure. So for me, those are kind of the top 3 guys for me in terms of who I guess the kind of the pecking order that I see them. Kenny Pickett's at 4, and I don't think it's anything to do with anything he's done wrong, because I don't think he's done wrong in the pre-draft process. I just think with those other 3 guys, I see a little bit more of a ceiling with them, but I do think Kenny Pickett of all the quarterbacks in this class, if he could come in right away and start and kind of be that Mac Jones-esque player in this draft, where he comes in and he brings stability to an offense, and he's going to take what the defense gives him. He's not a supreme risk taker. He can take risks down the field, but I think he plays within the confines of an offense and runs it efficiently. And I think that's what some teams are going to want in this class. So those are top 4 for me. And then to round it out, I have Sam Howell at 5 and Matt Corral on the outside looking in. So that's just kind of how I see the quarterback class in terms of the top 5 and how it stacks. Now, in terms of for the Steelers, I think the order of who they should probably go after is probably Willis, Pickett, then probably Ridder is how I would see things falling for them in terms of who the Steelers should go after. But, I kind of lean towards Willis and Ridder just for the athleticism standpoint and ability to make plays out of structure. And obviously Willis is a bit more of a project, quote unquote, and it's going to take a little bit longer to develop. But I like either guy for the Steelers.
when it comes to Alex and I specifically, we both have them at the bottom of the list now. Are we being do you feel people are too hard on Ritter's accuracy and, kind of the deep ball kind of concerns when it comes to him? Or are you? Do you think those kind of things are definitely fixable when it comes to like his quarterback's coach, Palmer, and all like that? Is this a situation where he's more likely, I guess, to take kind of the Justin Herbert role, or no, not Justin Herbert, Josh Allen type role, where people kind of said his mechanics were kind of off there, and he was able to kind of go through the process of cleaning some of that stuff up. Why are people all over the board on Ritter, do you think? I mean, all in this class in general, really.
I just think it depends on the value of how they see things. And if accuracy is a high value on how you view a quarterback, I think that makes sense why Ritter isn't as high on some people's boards. So I think for this class in particular, I think it depends on what are you valuing, and do you think the imperfections of his game are fixable. I think for Ritter, I don't think he's completely fixable. I think there are some things he just has a habit of doing, and I don't know if a quarterback coach is going to be able to clean it up completely, but I think there are, I don't want to say far less concerns, but for me, there's a little bit less concern with the accuracy side of things, because I feel like some of that is just the way he's approaching these throws, because we've seen him make all the throws on film. It's just about a consistency mindset. And I feel like there are times where he's aiming to throw instead of just naturally throwing the football. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it feels like he's just aiming and trying to be so perfect about every little thing he does. I think he kind of loses sight of that during the game. So for me, I see the struggles he has with accuracy. I know it's the big thing that people bring up, the deep ball concerns, but I also see there are flashes of high level play from him. He played really well down the stretch against Notre Dame and Indiana. And obviously the East Carolina game, he dominated, I think, after the first quarter. But for him, it's consistency. And I mean, with all these quarterbacks, it's consistency. I think in general, this class lacks consistency from a down-to-down, a game-to-game basis. But for me, and with Ritter, the reason I like him a little bit higher than I guess you guys is that I see that high-level play, and I see that if a team can continue to work towards his strengths, like throwing on the move, giving him, clean reads, being able to hit those deep ends and those deep end routes. I think that's one of his best routes that he throws. I think you continue to grow the confidence with him, and you can start to minimize some of those flaws. I don't think they'll ever go away. And I think accuracy is still going to be a big issue early on, but if you can get him comfortable in the offense and get him believing and not trying to be perfect on every single throw and just letting it go and not, working himself up on those open can't miss throws, I think he can be a much better quarterback accuracy wise at the NFL level.
When you look at, did you have of those five that people talk about the most, and not including Strong, obviously, do you have Corral last or Howell last?
I have Corral last after Howell.
Okay.
So it's Howell at 5 and then Corral at 6. Okay.
And where is Carson Strong's in there somewhere, or who's that oddball quarterback that you have in there?
Yeah, Strong is at 2.
Okay.
So it's Willis, Strong, Ritter, Pickett, and then Howell.
Okay. What are you not really seeing with Howell and Corral that's got them ranked so low on your board?
They're a tough one, because I see the talent they both have, but for me, I see kind of similar issues with their game. And starting with Howell, I see his struggles feeling pressure. He just when pressure like closes around him, he just everything becomes erratic with him. And obviously, a Virginia Tech game is a big game to point that out, but that's really other games. And because of how poor the offensive line played, and it's the same thing with Corral at times, he would just take off and run the football after going through maybe one or two reads. So it for them both, it was a struggle kind of getting through their film because like, it's RPO based. Both of their offense RPO based. I know Malik Willis offense wasn't great either, but they rely so much on RPOs, and it just felt like on those deeper concepts and those more somewhat complex, schemes that they just struggle with getting through the progressions. Well, I do think Howell has better eyes in terms of moving defenders than Corral, and I think Howell has plenty of arm strength. He has a really nice deep ball along with Corral. I just didn't see a lot of down-to-down consistency with both guys in terms of, are you running the offense? I just didn't see a lot of that from either guy. And I think Howell, for him, the hard thing about him is that his 2020 tape was a lot better than 2021. And I tried to, with these quarterbacks, not look too much back into 2020 because I think the most recent film should be the most important. And for Corral, he definitely turned down the turnovers a ton. But for Corral specifically, I just didn't see a lot of trust with the confines of the offense. It was, look for one, look for two, maybe a check down every now and then, but he would take off a lot, when he felt pressure or he saw a blitz coming, and instead of kind of hanging in the pocket. And both guys kind of underwhelmed me with how they were able to throw on the move. I expected a lot more from both of those guys with the skill set they have. So that kind of what it went into with me in terms of why I'm kind of low on those guys compared to the rest. I just feel like a lot of their game is, based on the running game, and I think both will have components to that at the NFL level. I don't think that's going to be something they can consistently depend on. And they both have to take care of their bodies better because they both took a lot of beating in their last season in college.
Okay, fair enough. Very interesting how, people are all over the board on this class. A lot of people have Malik at the top, and then it's like everybody else, and a lot of people have mixed feelings on those. Owen, your turn. Where do you come in on this class?
Yeah, so I'm admittedly pretty early just in general in terms of my experience scouting the quarterback position. I mainly do it through my evaluation of other guys and what I see in the quarterbacks with their matchups with them. But Malik Willis is the one that I really decided to take a closer look at just because of all the buzz around his name. And I'm always a big kind of traits oriented guy at the position. So Willis is the one to me where if I was going to take somebody, A, in the first 20 picks, but B, be willing to trade up for it, it definitely would be Malik Willis, just because a lot of what Devin touched on, can make all the throws. The off-script ability is huge. And I think you talked about that a lot with, kind of allowing Matt Canada to use his offense. I think Malik Willis could be great in some of those half-field rollout type things, give the option of running off of that, and even some more of the read option type game. So he's definitely number one on my board. I've grown to like Ritter a little bit more from what I've seen, and he's probably who I watched the most just in terms of TV tape games on this fall season. And I think the comp I've seen a lot from him on Twitter and whatnot was Ryan Tannehill, and I kind of see shades of his game in terms of good with the half field rollouts, can make that deep dig over the middle of the field, and more than anything, I think the type of guy that he can elevate a good offense, but is he going to succeed in an offense where a lot of the pieces aren't already around him? I don't know. I think that remains to be seen. Corral for me is the biggest one where I think I've seen enough to say that I'm somewhat out on him as a top 5 guy. Watched a couple different SEC DBs, and just the timing on a lot of his throws, particularly when he's trying to make the cover 2 hole shot type throw, cover 1 deep ball down the sideline. He's just kind of a tick late in his processing with that. So was not super impressed in what I saw from Corral in the couple SEC games I evaluated from him. And I think with Pickett, biggest thing there is just kind of the age, and especially in the situation that the Steelers are at, where you've got Mitch, you're ready, I would presume, to at least give him this season, or at least have him compete to play this entire season before inserting another guy into the lineup. And, as a 5th-year college senior, Pickett's already kind of up there in age. So I think that's just an interesting situation in terms of putting him in, because he's less of that developmental guy than, say, the Ritters and the Willis, particularly the Willises of the world. So I think if they're going to select one on day one, I would really like it to be Willis, and I'd like them, if they're going to do it, to be willing to make an aggressive move up to get him. And beyond that, I wasn't really too impressed with the rest of the class, but Ritter would definitely be my firm number 2.
And where are you on Howell? And you probably have. I understand you probably haven't watched as much because you were obviously on the defensive side of football. But on the flip side, you play, and you play in college, so you get to see kind of what you value in traits from actually being on that side of football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, with Howell, like Devin talked about, the rushing ability is definitely there, and you saw in 2020 when he's got the weapons around him. He can, get the ball. He makes some good throws, can fit him into tight windows. I think the processing's just still not great, and you kind of saw that this year where they put it more in his hands. But he's still a young guy, and I think he's another one of those guys where it's a somewhat developmental type of guy. So I think would I pick Sam Howell at pick 20? I don't think I'd be super comfortable with that, but I think in terms of as a developmental guy that, given, a year to sit, could potentially show some good traits, probably. And you hear the Baker Mayfield comparison a lot with him. And I think there's some truth to it. I'd say in terms of pure rushing ability, he actually might be, a little bit ahead of where Baker's at, but throwing, some of the similar concerns definitely show up.
No more questions. No more questions, Your Honor.
Oh, and I know you study DBs as much as anybody, probably more than anybody on the Depot team, because you're a DB yourself in college. And obviously, strong safety still outstanding. Who this starter is going to be? We imagine Pittsburgh will sign a veteran from now until the draft, but we don't know who that's going to be, and certainly may not preclude this team from adding a safety or even a cornerback in the later round. Just overall, give me some of your favorite DBs that are going to go in that Steelers range, starting at pick 20 into, say, round 2. So like your favorite DBs, corner or safety, from, say, around pick 20 to pick 52.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, first might go a little bit higher than pick 20, but a guy you profiled in Trent McDuffie from Washington. First of all, Washington has just done such a great job over the past half decade in developing defensive backs. Feels like they're getting like 1 to 2 top 3 round guys every single year. But I'd put both Trent McDuffie and their other cornerback, Kyler Gordon, in that, like, Gordon more second round, Trent McDuffie more first round, but 2 defensive backs who could fit in very well with the Steelers. Both have the ability to play on the slot and on the outside. They tackle the catch extremely well. And both, just super technically refined from both press and off coverage from where they're at right now. McDuffie, a little bit of the better athlete of the two, but Kyler Gordon's also got some great change of direction ability. And both of them just have a knack of forcing turnovers, whether it's punching through the pocket or breaking on routes. So I was extremely impressed with what I saw from both of their games. I think Kaiir Elam is another late first round type guy at the cornerback position, a little bit of a lengthier guy from Florida. And he's another one. He uses his length well, closes on the ball extremely well. And he's definitely going to be more of a boundary guy at the next level, but he's an interesting piece if you want another guy on the outside. And they have length at the position currently with Levi Wallace and Akella Witherspoon, but I think we've talked about it with Wallace from time to time, where maybe on some of those, dime package pass downs, you might want a little more of a coverage oriented player. So I think Elam's definitely an interesting guy in that respect. And then a lot of the buzz has come out about Kyle Hamilton after the lackluster 40 time. But I mean, if he were to somehow fall to pick 20, that'd be a guy I think you just have to consider. Just the versatility you could have back there with him and Minka, with both being able to play the post, both being able to roll down into the box, and specifically in some of those dime sets the Steelers use where they're going to put a safety into the box. I think Kyle Hamilton's perfect for that role. He's a great tackler, has good instincts for the position. Hips aren't like extraordinary in man coverage, but he covers ground well, and he's able to hold up in those situations. And then when put into zone and put into assignments where he can kind of just run and chase, he's an extremely impressive player to me at the position.
What about the other safeties? Dax Hill from Michigan, Lewis Sign from Georgia, Jaquan Brisker from Penn State, all guys Pittsburgh shown interest in. I know Hill signed probably more round 1 guys, Brisker more round 2. Do you have a favorite of those 3?
Yeah, so Brisker, I like Brisker a lot. He's a good instinctual player. To me, I mean, just in terms of the pure like athleticism traits, Sign's always been a favorite of mine. He went to Everett High School, which is about 30 minutes from me. So I've kind of been watching him really since high school. And he's an interesting player. I mean, another one of those just kind of like freak athletes at the position, can play any assignment you want him to, will come down and fill against the run. But I think, yeah, the biggest thing that, again, a guy like that's given you with Minka is, especially if Edmonds isn't coming back. And Edmonds wasn't extraordinary in that like roll down catch man type role when you're putting him on receivers. He's much better against tight ends. But I think if you can find that guy who can really function as well as a cornerback when he's rolling down and they're blitzing that nickel, it just opens up such great possibilities for the defense. And then also with really any of those 3, it's all about their ability to play the post. So then you can kind of move Minka around a little bit more, even though he's just so great in the post. In terms of, I think the best out of those 3 in terms of purely playing that like deep third post safety role is probably Brisker. He's got great instincts and good range from that position. I think best in terms of pure just versatility and how you're going to be able to use him is probably Sign. But I'd be really fine with particularly Sign at 20, I think would be a solid pick.
Owen, have you watched much Damari Mathis out of Pittsburgh?
No, I have not watched a ton of Damari Mathis yet.
Okay. Interesting. I want to dive deeper into this tape. I'm sorry, Alex, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I was going to ask Devin just to kind of continue to broaden out the discussion, because I know it's so quarterback heavy, and rightfully so. We know the odds of that happening are probably higher than any other position, though certainly not guaranteed. But if it isn't quarterback at 20, Devin, what positions and what names could you see being the most likely fits and options for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Well, I've been thinking, kind of about that, and for me, I mean, I could see with how deep this, interior offensive line and tackle class is, not tackle class, probably not so much at 20, but interior offensive line. I know that's something that the Steelers still may want to dip back into. There's guys like, Zion Johnson that is really elevated throughout this process, and one of my favorite players, offensive line wise on the board. I could see them continue to want to build that offensive line, and I could see that being a position of a need for that they address if they miss out on quarterbacks or they don't have the DB or safety they had one at 20. So I could see them dipping back into the tier offensive lineman class. Someone like Jordan Davis, if he were to fall to 20, I could see the Steelers being very interested in what he has and in his skill set, what he brings to the table. But for me, I think, secondary or quarterback is probably the way to go in this draft class, especially in the secondary, because there's such a deep class at the top, and so many people kind of see it differently after, they kind of have Derek Stingley and, Ahmad Gardner is probably the top 2 corners. But after that, there's a little bit of dichotomy. So for the Steelers, a name I'm surprised that hasn't been brought up more is Andrew Booth Jr. He's someone that interests me, and he's been kind of all over the board. I feel like media is probably a little bit higher on him than teams are. We've seen a lot of people have him top 10, top 15 on their boards, but does the NFL see him that high? I could see them not seeing him at quite as high as that, but I think he's someone that could be interesting to take a look at 20 and just with his athleticism. He has some freak athleticism, has some, real worthy interceptions over the years. Obviously, his pass breakup against, I believe it was Miami, he had a one-handed pass breakup. He was floating in the air, I think, against Pitt in 2020. So I think, he certainly has the athleticism. We play in a heavy zone scheme at Clemson, although a lot of people see his upside in man coverage, but they played a ton of cover 3 and cover 2. And I think he's a little bit better in the cover 3 in terms of just being able to cover ground, and be able to work vertically. But I think he's someone that should be talked a little bit, maybe a little bit more as a need for the Steelers at 20 if things don't go their way for the quarterback class.
Yeah, it's a great name, and it checks those boxes. What's your temperature on the receiver class? A deep class without a top name, at the very top of that group. Philosophically, are you more of a wait and get depth and kind of that value day 2, or do you want to take that swing day 1? And who are some of the receivers, say day 1, day 2, that you think would fit the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah, for me, I think I like the depth a little bit more for the Steelers in terms of who they can get on day 2. And I think it's just because I know a lot of teams are especially towards the end of the first round, are probably going to reach on some of these receivers and get some of those day 2 guys. But for me, when I think about the kind of the top names and who the Steelers currently have on the roster, I mean, you have a Chase Claypool who, if say Drake London fell to 20, I don't think the Steelers would be super interested in bringing someone kind of similar, like height, weight, size, kind of play style that Claypool already kind of possesses. To me, I feel like if they're going to bring somebody in, I mean, someone like a Jahan Dotson, I think would be great in the Steelers offense. And kind of have that inside out versatility. Obviously, they have Deontay Johnson, who does a little bit of that already, but they do have a need with Juju Smith-Schuster and James Washington obviously leaving. You need a little bit more versatile guys. So someone like Jahan Dotson would intrigue me. I'm not sure exactly where, in terms of where he's going to go, because there's some people mocking him at the end of round 1. Maybe he goes off the board early round 2. So he may be out of the question. But, someone even like a Christian Watson, who people I think are all over the board too. I think he's someone that would intrigue me on day 2. Just because of, there's a lot to like with this game. Obviously, the speed profile, the size. I think there's still some work to be done in terms of route running. And I think getting him paired with a receiver coach at the NFL level will certainly help that and accentuate that, because I don't think he was really asked to do a whole bunch at North Dakota State, since they're a power run heavy offense that, likes to take shots every now and then. So I would like someone like a Christian Watson, Jahan Dotson, probably on day 2 for the Steelers. I think the round 1 guys are fantastic. I think Jameson Williams will be an excellent pick at 20 if he's there, and if the Steelers, believe he's going to be healthy by the time training camp rolls around. I think of the first round guys, the high ones, I think he would probably fit best in that offense as a true field stretcher, because I don't think the Steelers really have that quote unquote with what they have on the roster. But I think outside of that, I would like a Dotson or Watson on day 2, in my opinion, just because I feel like the class is deep enough where you can still find a quality second or third option to add to what you already have on the Steelers roster.
Yeah, Watson makes sense. He checked every box in our what they look for study we talked about earlier in the show. Dave, any other questions you wanted to ask those guys?
Devin, and I know you studied this wide receiver group quite a bit. I mean, he really, you study all these positions, but I see you posted a lot on some of these wide receivers throughout the process here. There are a few what we would kind of term as undersized wide receivers in this class, especially when it comes to what the Steelers look for specifically. I mean, heck, if you go back through the history of Kevin Colbert as GM, and Alex and I have talked about this recently, I think technically only 2 wide receivers, depending on what you called Dree Archer when he came out, 2 wide receivers under 5'10", that have been drafted by the Steelers, and one of those was Antoine Randall way back, and he came out as a quarterback there. But you look at the middle rankings on some of these guys kind of globally, and you see guys like Sky Moore at 5'9" and 5'8". You see guys like who's another one? Wandale Robinson out of Kentucky, listed I think at 5'8" on the nose. Another one of those is and he was at the Senior Bowl too, Calvin Austin out of Memphis at I think 5'7" and 3/4 there. And then I don't need to tell you about our guy Devin Tompkins, out of Utah State. Why the heck that guy didn't at least get a combine invite, I don't know. But where do you come in on some of these undersized wide receivers, and is that much of a knock on these guys?
I don't think it's a knock anymore, because we've seen over recent years the NFL just wants guys that can get open and have speed. And if you have both of those things, I don't think it matters as much in the process anymore. I mean, the biggest example is Tutu Atwell last year. He went in the second round, and compared to some of these guys in this year's class, I would say they have far better tape than Tutu Atwell had. So I don't think size matters as much anymore, because it's such a fast-paced game, and you can make things work even when they don't have the ideal height or size. If you can get open and you're a crafty route runner, and you're not afraid to go over the middle, I mean, I don't think it matters much anymore. You look at Tyler Lockett for Seattle. He's done just fine in his career as a quote-unquote undersized guy. So for me, I think it's more about how do they win. And for me, Devin Tompkins, the last thing you mentioned, he wins vertically. He wins laterally. He can take screens and create 20 to 25 chunk yard gains. So for me, I think it's learning how can they win. Because obviously contested catch is not going to be a translatable trait for them specifically. So are they able to create separation? How do they handle press coverage? Sky Moore is one of the better, has one of the better release packages of those smaller guys that you mentioned, in terms of being able to beat press coverage and do it at a consistent basis. So, I think that's what's going to intrigue teams about him and his route running ability. So, can you get off the line of scrimmage is the first question, because, teams are going to press them to knock off that timing. And then second, how do you create separation? I think all those guys do a great job of using their speed, but also craftiness as a route runner from the outside and interior and the inside. I think it makes them a little bit more valuable too. You're not just a slot only guy. You can be a Z move guy in some situations, or you can be motion in and out, and you can be the jet fly sweep guy. So I think for those smaller receivers, if you have a more total skill set and you're not just relying on just speed or, your ability to go and be vertical in the air, I think that is what's kind of separating some of these guys. So a lot of those guys you mentioned have day 2 grades for me. Devin Tompkins actually has a 4th round grade for me. And I know he may not even get drafted, or he may go late in the 6th or 7th round, but I value his ability to stretch the field truly and be able to create separation while the ball's in the air. So I think there are roles for each one of those guys. And I don't think size matters as much at the receiver position, just because we've seen how much the passing game has evolved and how many different things you can do or line up receivers at.
Do you think the NFL scouts and teams value guys like Devin Tompkins, higher than draft Twitter and YouTube Twitter and internet Twitter and that because do you think they look at outsiders look at Devin Tompkins and say 5'6" and 7/8 and 167? No way. I mean, nobody's probably watched as much tape on Devin Tompkins as you, and then I'm right behind you, I think, and on that. And I'm with you. I mean, I would not flinch at drafting a fourth round, spending a fourth round pick on a guy like Devin Tompkins. I'm just wondering why you think that the community as a whole is so much, because the rest of these guys in the top 20, 25, pretty interchangeable, I would probably say, for the most part, especially for the second through third, fourth round guys. But man, to see someone like Devin Tompkins that low versus what guys like you and I view him as, why do you suppose that is? Do you think it just is a height weight? Because I mean, we both agree that this guy can go up and make some contested catches, but as you said, probably not going to be relied on doing that as much at the NFL level with the competition there. So why is there such a difference there, do you think?
I think part of it goes to kind of who we play for. And I know helmet scouting is something people have tried to get away from, but I mean, I guess it's like you expect certain receivers to come from certain colleges. Like obviously you expect Ohio State's to produce receivers, LSU, Alabama, et cetera. I think part of that is a school. And then also, I do think it's the height weight comparison, but it just doesn't make sense to me because Tutu Atwell was someone that people liked in the draft community last year, and although most didn't have him going in the second round, they had a third or fourth round grade on him. So to me, what's the difference? And I think the Power Five is the difference with some of these smaller guys. I think, when you think about what Calvin Austin was able to do at the Senior Bowl, kind of what Sky Moore was able to do in the MAC, and he's somehow, a day 2 pick among most people. Why isn't Devin Tompkins getting that same buzz? He obviously got the College Gridiron Showcase invitation, but why didn't he get, a Shrine Bowl appearance, or why didn't he get a Senior Bowl appearance?
Right.
That's questions that I have, and I think it part of that is it's just the school, because Utah State is. I mean, this past season was one of their best seasons in probably recent history, like the last 5 or 6 years. And, I think with people or with players that size not coming from a Power Five, I think people kind of doubt that ability. But he also has a special teams background. So for me, he is at least worth a flyer, because if he doesn't pan out as a receiver, he can certainly be a returner that can flip the field for you. And he's very elusive and fast in the open field. So I'm just a bit surprised his name hasn't come up more. I understand as a pure receiver, there may be better options that people see, but I think he certainly should be talked about more. And honestly, if he were selected on day 3 of the draft, I would not be surprised, because he has more value than just being a two-way slot guy at the NFL level. He brings a little bit more to the table than that.
And one final question for you about wide receiver. Where do you come in on George Pickens out of Georgia?
I think he's, kind of, for me, it's Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, Drake London, Olave, and Jamison Williams. But I think he's in that next cluster of receivers, like behind those top 5, where his ceiling is certainly high. You see the skill set, but he's still developing, because obviously he missed most of the season this year. You really have to go a lot off the 2020 tape, and there were flashes in 2021. Obviously, he made that terrific diving catch, right, I believe, in the national championship against Alabama. But you haven't seen a whole bunch from him really since then. So I think you bet on a guy like that on day 2. And you hope that he can develop, because we've seen a lot of receivers over the last couple of years. Those day 2 receivers have developed nicely. You think about obviously DK Metcalf is the most recent example, 2nd round pick. Michael Thomas is another example. Terry McLaurin. So I think he can fit that bill of being a great second round pick receiver that we look back in a couple of years and wonder why he wasn't a first rounder. But we also remember that he, didn't play a lot of 2021 and injuries have kind of hampered his career a bit. But I think he certainly has the skill set and physicality and really everything you look for in a modern day X or Z receiver. It's just about how fast he can develop and continue to grow his game. Because I think route running, it needs to be a little bit more efficient in that degree and not relying so much on that freak athleticism to bail him out of some terrific catches.
Oh, and hearing about Devin Tompkins and kind of the diamond in the rough, ultra sleeper, day 3 kind of guy, for you, who is your DB equivalent of Devin Tompkins? That late day 3 sleeper, no one's talking about, but you're a lot higher on.
I know who it is. I know who it is.
All right. Well, Owen, you tell me who it is.
Yeah, I've actually been seeing more buzz on his name recently. Prior to the Shrine Bowl, I hadn't seen too much, but Dallas Flowers, who I got to know a little bit at the Shrine Bowl, finally was able to he put me in contact with a couple guys in the Pitt State program. I was able to locate some games to finally get some eyes on, his game at that level. And really, I mean, the cornerback tape was great, but in terms of as a pure kick returner, I mean, he's among the best in the class. I mean, I saw some almost like Cordarrelle Patterson-like ability to just hit a seam and run straight through contact. Like arm tackles really don't affect this guy. And then in terms of purely in coverage, he's not, I mean, is he the most technically refined corner you're going to see at any level? No, but he's got all the traits, in my opinion. He's extreme. He ran a 4.440 at his pro day, which, to be fair, it is a pro day, but I mean, he looks fast in person for his size. And he's listed at about 6'1", 200, but he carries the frame very well. He's a lengthy guy. And in person at the Shrine Bowl, he was just suffocating some pretty good receivers in press coverage, even in one-on-one drills where really none of the cornerbacks were having too much success. Namely, a couple of receivers he was competing against: Kyle Phillips from UCLA, Josh Johnson from Tulsa, Tay Martin from Oklahoma State, and Mel's guy, Taquan Thornton from Baylor, who are all pretty good receivers and were giving a lot of the other DBs trouble there. Thought he held up really well. And I mean, again, it's not, do I think he's ready to start day 1 as an outside corner at the NFL level? Probably not. But I think any team that gets him, you're getting a great kick returner that can instantly give you boost there. And, with a year of work in a system, I think this guy could develop into a very, very good press coverage type corner on the outside. Also looks pretty good in, cover 3 with his press bail. Works pretty well in cover 2, not afraid to come up and support the run. So I think, naturally, this guy was an NIAI guy, just transferred to Division II level for his final year of college. So just on a pure exposure level, he's not going to go as high as maybe he would if he was in another conference. But I think, especially at an all-star game, he proved his ability to compete against top competition. And you saw his skill set succeed in that level.
Yeah, I know you've been high on him for a while. What's one or two other maybe slightly more known names, but still day 3 guys that you just think are good value? Should Pittsburgh, say, be looking for maybe a corner, rounds 4+?
I'm not sure if he'll fall to day 3. I mean, I could see him as like a day 2, day 3 type guy, but Sam Houston State's Zion McCollum really impressed me going through his tape. I mean, I think he's got some of the best just pure hips in the class. I mean, he'll be pressing. He kind of plays with a little more of a motor press type technique where he'll give ground and allow receivers to dictate the release, but he can flip his hips seamlessly. He's got some of the best ball skills in the class, and he'll come up and support the run pretty well. He's got slot and outside experience and really good size. And then I think it was like his 3-cone and 5.10.5 both like atop this DB class.
It's like 3.94, I think, in the short shuttle, something crazy like that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and just on film, his change of direction ability was off the charts. Despite his size, he's a little bit shorter in the arms, so he'll struggle at times against like bigger receivers and jump ball type situations. But outside of that, I couldn't find too many like major weaknesses in his game. And then another one, as for like, day 3-ish type guys, is Caitlyn Barnes, who's another one of these just freak athletes, ran I think 4.2 340 this year. And he's another one. I mean, he's a little bit raw, but watching him in person, covers ground extremely well when you put him in zone coverage type situations. And he could still use some refinement in his work at the line of scrimmage, but he's got good hips and he can run with pretty much everyone. The next step with him is just becoming a little bit more physical, I think. And then finally, I'd go Jack Jones, who I just profiled from Arizona State. The off-field troubles are another issue there. I think it was like a felony burglary charge after he got kicked out of USC. But he rebounded, had 2 really productive seasons with an injured season in between at Arizona State. And just a guy who is just a natural ball player. He's got good hips, plays the catch point extremely well, not afraid to tackle for his size. Issues will arise supporting the run when, let's say, a receiver gets into his chest or something. He has a tough time getting off blocks, but he triggers quickly, and a lot of times he can keep receivers away from him. So he's a good day 3 guy who I think could give slot boundary type versatility and immediately contribute on a team's dime package or something.
Dave, go ahead.
Edge rushers, it's something that we talk about. It seems like more outside the podcast than we do inside the podcast here. But the fact of the matter is, this team right now, they really could use another edge rusher on there. I know they went out and signed the Memphis kid here recently, and he's undersized at 6 foot. There, just you kind of wonder how he's going to match up if indeed they list him as an edge rusher there. I don't expect the Steelers to spend maybe a 1st or 2nd round draft pick on a position, although they could. You got guys like David Ojabo out of Michigan who, because of the Achilles, is probably going to slip a little bit. Are there any mid-round? I'll start with Devin here. Any kind of mid-round guys, edge rushers that fit that stand on your feet, 3-4 outside linebacker that the Steelers look for?
Yeah, there's a few names that come to mind. For me specifically, I think this is an extremely deep class with, there's all types of, edge rushers. You have the guys that can be like 5 techs. You have the guys that can be true 7 and 9 techs and come straight off the edge. You also have the stand-up guys. So for me, I think there's a few guys I think that to keep in mind on day 3 who I think could kind of fit that bill. So one being D'Angelo Malone from Western Kentucky. I think, he's kind of been on the radar the last couple seasons as someone that, from the group of 5 that can kind of make that jump to NFL level and be productive. Quick first step, someone that has really started to develop his pass rush arsenal. And I think he can drop in the coverage a bit. He played that kind of stand-up role at Western Kentucky and has kind of been that standout guy for them over the last couple of seasons. So he's a name that I will watch. Another name that I like personally that I think still learning the position, still relatively new to the position, that'll be Dominique Robinson out of Miami of Ohio. He used to be a receiver, then tight end. But a couple of seasons ago, he transferred and became a full-time edge. Played more of a hand in the ground defensive end while he was at Miami, Ohio. But I do think with his previous athleticism plus just ability, quick first step, and ability to turn the corner, I think he can transition into that 3-4 role and become an outside backer. So I think those are a couple two names to watch out for on day 3. I think both guys could be a fit for the Steelers on day 3. I do think Robinson can go a little bit higher if the team kind of falls in love with his ability. But in terms of guys that can be stand-up edge rushers coming off the edge, I see both of those guys as a potential fit for what the Steelers do.
Where do you come in on Myjai Sanders? People seem to be kind of hot and cold, either hot or real hot on or cold on him. Didn't I don't think test all that great, and didn't he lose quite a bit of weight for the combine or whatnot? Where do you come in on Sanders?
Yeah, so Sanders for me, he's still a day 2 pick. I think he's a late 3rd round pick, and it's because I see the traits. There are traits there with him. He has some of that flexibility, been around the edge, and one of those kind of loose athletes that you just. I just don't think he really figured out where his playing weight should be at the college level, and I think putting on weight and then losing weight has really affected kind of his pre-draft process. Thought he was going to look a little bit better down at the Senior Bowl than he did. I think his hands still have a little bit of ways to go to be a true effective 3-down guy. But I think at the very least, early on in his career, he can be a pass rush 3rd down specialist because I do think there are some unique speed and bend that he has. But for me, I think the tape overall wasn't a great watch. He really struggled in the run game, holding his his gap, his lane integrity, and just getting blown off the ball a little bit too much for my liking. So I think being an NFL weight program is going to help, just understanding what weight he needs to play at and being consistent, and figuring that out. I think it's going to be the most important thing for him. And I think him being a 3-4 edge rusher will certainly be better for him, I think, in the long run, as opposed to being a hand in the ground guy, just because I think he just struggles working in the interior within the confines of the interior. So I think, he has to have a specific role early on so he can start to figure out the rest of his game. But I do see some value on him late on day 2.
Oh, and my last question for you as we kind of begin to wrap things up, just a comment you made earlier that brought the thought to mind. You talked about Elam being a boundary corner in the NFL. I know Sauce Gardner kind of viewed in that similar way. Do you think those guys can work in the NFL, though, because the hashes in the NFL are much more narrow and there really isn't as clear-cut of a field and boundary that the way that there is in college football, when those guys have to play in more space, and even if the ball's on one hash, there's still more space than they have to cover in college? Do you think that transition is tough for those guys? Do you really feel like there really can be a true thing as a boundary corner in the NFL?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think when I think NFL boundary corner, I more think about just kind of guys who play on the outside in general, whereas you're very right. In college, a lot of teams, like particularly with Cincinnati, Sauce is playing the boundary, and then you got Kobe Bryant always moving to the field, so they're flipping sides each time. I think it's really a prospect to prospect type thing with Kyer, and especially with Sauce. I think Sauce has the, size, speed, and I doesn't have the greatest hips in the world, but I think his makeup speed more than makes up for it, and he's just so physical at the line of scrimmage that I think he'll have no problem succeeding. I think with other guys, like say a guy I profiled in Martin Emerson Jr. from Mississippi State, he was also a boundary corner, and I think he benefited a lot from being on the boundary. So it might be a little tougher for a guy like him to transition to the next level. I mean, the main thing these boundary guys get that they don't get at the NFL level is just like you're talking about with condensed splits, where a guy's in the boundary. It's like if he's lining up inside the numbers versus outside the numbers, you can really have a good idea of like what kind of routes you can limit him to running. Whereas at the NFL level, especially when they start doing some like formation and boundary type stuff, there's a lot of times where you have so much field to cover. So it's a good question. And I think particularly with the guys at the top of this class and like the Sauce and the, Derek Stingleys of the world, I think they're more than capable of handling it. I think as you get later in the draft and get some of these kind of day 3 guys who made a living on the boundary, that's where you start to find the tough transition to the next level.
Gotcha. No, good answer. Yeah, I just wanted to get your philosophical take on that, so I appreciate the answer. Dave, any final questions for these guys?
Yeah. One final question. I asked this to a couple of the other guys we had on in the roundtables here. Not in the first round, but sometime after the first round. Attempt to call your shot. Name one player that you think the Steelers will draft after round 1.
I'll go first. I think the Steelers in the second or third round. I think th're going to draft Jamarice Salyer from Georgia. He just feels like a Steelers offensive lineman that they will go after. I really like this tape. Played a lot of different positions on that Georgia offensive line, and just I just see him as someone they can stick in where they need help at, and he can come in and play right away. So I like Salyer as a day two pick at some point for the Steelers, because I just feel like it just makes sense and he just feels like a Steeler when you watch him play on tape. So that's one of my guys that I think could end up as a Steeler.
Okay, Owen.
Yeah, I'd probably go later in the draft. A guy that was at the Shrine Bowl, and Josh Johnson, and me and Josh Carney, also at the site. We just the whole time. I mean, he's got that kind of like Deontay Johnson, Antonio Brown type skill set where you just watch his releases off the line of scrimmage. He can just release effortlessly, wins through route running, and has the ability to shake defenders after the catch. So I think he'll probably be a day 3 guy, but just in terms of the track record of what Kevin Colbert and company look for in wide receivers, especially later in the draft, I think he'd be a perfect guy where maybe they're a little bit higher on him than a lot of the rest of the teams evaluating him are.
Interesting. Okay.
All right. We will keep our eyes on those guys. Devin, Owen, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Again, be sure to follow Devin on Twitter at @RealD_Jackson and follow Owen at Owen Straley 21. Be sure to check out their work on Steelers Depot, giving us still player profiles in the 15 days leading up to the 2022 NFL Draft. Again, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us on.
And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. And again, our special thanks to Devin Jackson, Owen Straley for coming on the show. Again, be sure to follow Devin on Twitter at @RealD_Jackson and follow Owen at Owen Straley 21. Appreciate their time and their insight as always.
Boy, more all over the board with the quarterbacks, right? I mean, so we're going to have a lot. Each of us is going to have a lot to take away, I think. And obviously, look, we're not going to know who's right or wrong about several of these, quarterbacks. Maybe a couple, 2-3 seasons into this thing, with a few of them there. But I guess my initial thoughts or interest is what order these guys actually come off the board in, how many of them go in the first round, how many go in the second round, do any of them slip to the third round? Because we got guys like, both Owen and Devin seem pretty high on Ritter, right? And not so much on guys like Corral and Howell, who we have kind of opposite where they have them here. So it just goes to show you that, once again, as we've said throughout this entire process, man, that this isn't a science whatsoever. And, obviously going to have a lot to learn throughout this entire process, because the 6 plus us are just all over the board as far as the rankings go.
Yeah, and I think it's Desmond Ritter's agent calling you right now, trying to get him to move up your draft board. It's polarizing. Like I said, the rankings are all over the place. I think Ritter, though, seems to be the most polarizing guy, because in the article I wrote on Monday about like our Steelers Depot collective kind of quarterback rankings, of the 6 guys who had votes in that article, Desmond Ritter appeared in all 5 spots. Someone had him first place, someone had him second place, someone had him third place, someone had him fourth place. You and I both had him 5th place. And so, in only 6 votes he had, he ran the whole gamut. And so that's to me the most interesting guy. And he's, according to the guys on TV, the draft analysts, that he's getting that first round buzz. And so that may be one of those guys that kind of is working his way into that first round conversation, where as opposed to a month ago, we thought he was a day 2 kind of guy. Yeah,
but unless there's I don't. How does a guy? I've never understood the whole guys moving up the board thing. That's something that always is kind of, how does a guy, his tape's tape at this point now?
Yeah, the media catches up to it. They're not actually moving up. It's just the media finding out where teams really have it.
Right. And it's not like Ritter's new. As many games as he played at Cincinnati as well too. I look forward to finding out am I putting too much emphasis on accuracy? Am I putting too much emphasis on the deep ball or specifically how Ritter throws the deep ball. Am I putting too much emphasis on extending the play? It's just going to be interesting to watch this whole thing play out. And I think the two most intriguing overall when it comes to my own rankings, where I'm going to be interested in, I think, is Ritter and a guy like Corral. Because, obviously because him being an underclassman, really being the most RPO centric of them all in here. And the fact that, wondering about the wonderment part of him being able to make all the throws, really going to be interesting to play out. Now, I will not let many people forget it, though, if Ritter ends up being the last the last quarterback off the board. Now, just because he is, it doesn't mean that he can't succeed. I mean, look at Jimmy Garoppolo, right? A second round kid that has had some levels of success. Obviously, making it to the Super Bowl is that's quite the success, no matter how you slice it, no matter how he got there, even though he did end up losing it. I guess another one. What round did Joe Flacco go in? You remember? Was he a first round guy?
I believe he was, but Derek Carr, second round guy, just got paid today. So there's one of your more recent examples of a second round pick who certainly worked out. Yeah, Flacco, 18th overall in 08.
18th. Okay, 18th. That's right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so you don't want to say that they can't succeed, but it's I don't know. I mean, it sounds like first round guys are going to be, and who knows what will happen. It sounds like Willis, Pickett, Ritter sneaking his way somewhere in there, maybe on Corral, but he may fall out of the first round. But it sounds like Willis, Pickett, and potentially Ritter.
Where would you say that maybe you potentially overrate a guy like Corral?
Well, that's a hard question, I guess, for me to answer because you like to think you rate him fairly. I think understanding
his
that
accuracy, what is his?
I think it's a pretty accurate quarterback. I mean, I don't know people who are knocking his accuracy too much. Maybe
quick release as too much of a. Not maybe so much overrated is where potentially do you think you're putting too much emphasis on him on his positives?
I think it might be I should put more emphasis on the offense in which he played in that RPO heavy offense. How does it translate? And I get that because there is a projection there, but it's a projection with all these quarterbacks.
Right.
Very few of these guys are coming out clean. I know Pickett's in a better place and Ritter was a little more pro style, but even he, they weren't on our center hardly at all. So there were some more pro style reads with other quarterbacks. All these guys have to learn. And so, if you have Malik Willis, your number one quarterback, you can't also say, well, Corral didn't play an NFL offense. Well, Willis didn't either, and people have him as their first round quarterback, the top quarterback. So to me, that's just inconsistent to think about it in those terms.
Now, obviously, we have all spent a lot more time on this position than we normally do. Now, I know you spent, some time on the position last off season, and you did a lot more work on the class on the quarterback class than I did. And maybe that is just leading to being more magnified, right? Or us magnifying it because of us thinking that the Steelers are going to go that direction, not only at the position, but early in the draft as well too. But it is quite interesting that we're the 6 plus. Me and you are all over the board on this class.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of quarterbacks, ESPN's Mel Kiper Jr. released his 2-round mock draft today for ESPN. Has the team taking Kenny Pickett, number 20 in round 1, and Alabama wide receiver John Mechie in round 2. So Pickett's a name we've heard time and time again. Mechie, a name we haven't gotten a lot of talk on in Pittsburgh. The injury he's had probably playing a role in that, but like the fit there for Pickett and Mechie, Kiper did for Pittsburgh.
Now wait a minute, I was told that Pickett wasn't going to be on the board at 20.
I mean, I'm not sure anyone who says any of that with confidence to me is just blowing smoke because it's really hard to know who's going to go where.
There's like 100 players now that aren't going to be on the board when the Steelers pick at 20.
Yeah.
I just I get it. Let me put it to you this way. I still am at the point where it comes to at least two guys like Pickett and Malik Willis, I would not bet my house that both of them will be off the board at 20. That's where I'm at on it.
Yeah, again, it's all possible. What does Carolina do at 6 in terms of brass tacks? What does Carolina do at 6? What does Atlanta do at 8? What does Seattle do at 9?
Now, will one of those guys probably go in the first 19 picks? Probably, at least, right?
Yeah, but I mean, history also says usually 2 go in the top 20. Not always, and this is a weaker class.
But which 2?
That's a very good question. I can't answer it. I think Willis will be 1. From there, it's more up in the air. Pickett would make sense. Carolina at 6 would make sense. But is that one? I almost get a little nervous. We talk about Pickett to Carolina this whole process, and it's like sometimes those things that we think are tape to tape aren't actually tape to tape, and those are the things that surprise us.
Okay.
So
I tell you what, I tried my best to watch a lot of games from each one of these quarterbacks, and not just because some of these prospects you only have time to watch like 3 games on them. But man, I tried to watch such a large selection, and I have a lot more time than most people, and you do as well too, to some degree when we're not doing our other duties and all like that. But man, I really tried to concentrate on making sure I watch plenty on these quarterbacks this year.
Yeah, no, I think you did. I mean, I tried to watch. I didn't watch as much as you, but I did watch more than maybe a typical non-quarterback because of the importance of the prospect and how much it dominates our conversation. So that's the Mo Kiper mock draft. You can read about that on Steelers Depot.
Mechie's coming off an injury too, right?
Yeah, the ACL. Him and both Alabama receivers, Williams and Mechie, coming off 20 ACLs.
Okay.
All right, Dave. Let's get to read emos and close out today's show.
All right, let's get to it here. We will start with, let's see, from Ross writes in, hey guys, I've been loving your draft discussions on the podcast. My question is about how we talk about Pickett versus the other 4 quarterbacks in the top 5. When discussing Pickett, there seems to be this assumption that he can't or won't improve once he gets to the NFL level, but the others like Willis will improve. This is something I have also heard outside of Steelers Depot, and I just don't really get it. Everyone is going crazy for Willis, but then they throw in the caveat that you can't start him right away, but that's okay because of the skill set, and he will improve once he's in the NFL. Why can't Pickett improve is the question. I understand he is 13 months older than Willis, and you would expect him to be more NFL ready, quote unquote, he is. It just seems that when someone mentions drafting Pickett, it's like it turns into Jared Goff or 34-year-old Andy Dalton the second he enters the league. But with any of the other 4 quarterbacks, you're free to imagine what they could become. He says, by the way, I love Willis and would be ecstatic if we could get him. He says he'd also be happy with Pickett at 20. Ross, look, I think it's just, beauty and evaluations and growth potential is all in the eye of the evaluator. And I'm not going to sit here and say that Kenny Pickett can't improve. I just think it's more of what you see on tape versus historically with a guy with that many starts, kind of trying to decipher, is there anything out there that maybe we haven't seen, or any of his area of his game in all these games that are on tape that we think, we've seen all these games, but maybe he can get even better at this or that. Not saying that he can't. I just think when you have a player like Kenny Pickett that has such a large selection of games at this point, at least the feeling with me is what we have seen now over this large swath of games is kind of what we get.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point to say certainly Pickett can and will improve. All these guys, none of these guys are absolute finished products, but it's natural that there are some guys who are just simply more maxed out than others, guys whose games are more refined, and Pickett has a more refined game as Willis. So that curve in terms of like how much are you going to grow, because Willis has a lot of things to work on, there's potential that if those things get corrected, that you can get an even better player than what he is currently in terms of mechanics, in terms of running a pro style offense and those kinds of things. And Pickett has done some of those things. Now you could say that, you're knocking Pickett for being too clean, for being too refined, for being too ready. And Willis, you get kind of, I think Cal Brandt used the phrase drunk on ceiling about what he could be and the potential, not actually, what he is currently. And that's probably, I think, a more fair critique about the process. But you just look at the traits and, if everything comes together, Willis is so much more physically talented than Pickett, any other quarterback in this class. That's where you kind of really get the allure of the upside and what he could be.
All right. And look, I mean, once again, the conversations that I think if you've listened to this show over the last couple weeks specifically here and outside of, because Alex and I talk quarterbacks seemingly every podcast throughout since I don't know, Senior Bowl or whatnot, but I just goes to show you how all of us are all over the board on these guys and how hard it is to to kind of rank these kind of guys here. I mean, once again, as Alex said, I mean, Ritter is in all 5 spots in the top 5 quarterbacks as far as kind of each of us doing our rankings here. So, I mean, I wish we could give you more definitives on, well, this one's going to be this and this and that, but no one can. Really, it's such a hard and the biggest thing, the biggest want that I have coming out of this is trying to figure out maybe where I overemphasized a positive or a negative in these guys moving forward in today's game. Period.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I just think about, I understand that, Pickett, Ritter to a degree are considered like the pro ready, day one ready guys. But I think about what's that going to look like a year from now when they're all kind of been in the system, been in the NFL, and kind of are all more or less pro ready, or at least comfortable with that environment. And then they're all kind of on that even playing field. Who's going to really then be the better player? And that's when it goes back to the physical tools and talent for me. And that's why I lean so much Malik Willis. And I understand, Pickett's going to grow. All these guys are going to grow, but Willis is capable of doing things in moments and flashes that none of these other quarterbacks are, especially Pickett. And so that's where you become more excited about how much a guy could grow. There's a much better chance Willis grows by leaps and bounds than what Pickett will probably do.
And not that one should just highlight scout, but Willis's highlights really fancy your imagination of maybe how some of that stuff can translate at the NFL level, and especially if his lowlights are decreased significantly.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to highlight scout, but if you put together Malik Willis's best 5 plays and Kenny Pickett's best 5 plays, you see Malik Willis has the wow factor is a lot higher. And you say, how can we unlock that? And if you can find just some consistency in that game and clean up the mechanics, you're going to have a really high ceiling kind of guy. And that's where the allure of Malik Willis comes into play.
And look, I mean, we're few of us are going to, based on the rankings alone, some of us are going to miss on our rankings on where they go and what they become and this, that, and the other, but we just got to try to use it as a learning process there. So no, it's not that Kenny can't be, an NFL quarterback and a successful one. And who knows, maybe even a Super Bowl quarterback and one that plays in the NFL for 10 years. But I think it's based on what he has on tape right now, what we think that maybe, or at least I think, or the individual thinks where his growth and development, how much more he has in that area. Daniel writes in, Dear David and Alex, with teams letting the likes of Tyreek Hill, Juju, and Devontae Adams go in trades and free agency, avoiding the big paydays and opting to potentially spend second and third day draft picks to reload the wide receiver rooms, is this the beginning of possibly an era of wide receiver fungibility? Interested in your thoughts as a few wide receivers push the market higher. Some teams are starting to counter that with youth in the draft as a cheaper option, or is this just an odd offseason and draft where the market is resetting a bit? Thanks for all your work you put in at the Depot. Look, I don't track receivers across the NFL about who looks like they might be doing this more so in free agency or at the position overall. Now, I tell you what, a longtime kind of commenter on the site, Brett Davis, had an article a few weeks ago about stat study, are wide receivers fungible in the NFL? So if you missed that, it was on March the 23rd that Brett Davis posted that, kind of really asking the same question: Are wide receivers more fungible in today's NFL? I will speak to this when it comes to the Steelers specifically. Why is it that the Steelers don't, at least in the Kevin Colbert era, they don't prescribe to making those guys the highest paid kind of wide receivers in the NFL? Now, even and I'm talking about first contracts after as they're about to hit free agency, everybody will point back and say, well, Antonio Brown back in his first contract, what was it, 48 million or whatever it was on what was it, like a six-year deal or something like that. Well, back at the time, that wasn't top of the market though, period. And they did have kind of back then, because they had Antonio Brown. I've told this story several times. They did kind of have Antonio Brown kind of trapped at the time because rumor was they offered the contract to Mike Wallace at first. Mike Wallace didn't want it, and then you have a guy like Antonio Brown, who was going to be trapped in the restricted free agency mode at that time, because back then the Steelers would take those lower draft picks and they would sign them to just 3-year deals, whereas the CBA now says rookies have to be signed to 4-year deals. And the Steelers kind of did that because they could kind of play with them in the restricted free agency year. If you will, kind of had them under their thumb, if you will. But I think if you just look globally at the Steelers in the wide receiver position, they normally are more apt to send guys on their way after 4 years, right? And we're obviously going to get a good kind of idea maybe again about that this offseason with Deontay Johnson, because I don't think it's a slam dunk guarantee that they extend Deontay Johnson, and definitely not at a number closing in on 20 million there. So the question would be, do the Steelers just consider that a 4 years and out kind of disposable position, if you will? Does that make sense?
It does. I would disagree a little bit, but I think Deontay Johnson is going to be a really interesting case study for this, because I'm just trying to think, like, what marquee receiver has Pittsburgh let walk before? They locked up AB, and they've let some guys go, but it's not like they've let a number one receiver, like clear-cut dude, hit the market before. Okay,
fair point. But also there's a narrative go around that Steelers don't miss on wide receivers in the draft. That's just really not they do miss.
Oh, sure. Anyone who says they have 100% hit rate on anything is
right.
talking
but
too.
I'm not saying the narrative is 100%, but the overarching thought is, boy, the Steelers draft wide receivers so much better than the rest of the NFL.
Well, I think some of the data, at least in recent years, has backed that up. I don't have it offhand on me, but like, what team drafts receivers better than the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I mean, definitely not New England Patriots, I'll tell you that, and definitely not the Baltimore Ravens comparatively.
I think there's been some studies done on, I forget what the metric was to quantify it, but like Pittsburgh's come out on top or just about at the top.
What does that player have to be to get that kind of deal, though? And let's face it, Juju would not have been back last offseason if the Steelers did not utilize the void year process. Would you agree?
Probably true, but he was back, and
right.
That's all that ultimately matters. And obviously, he didn't command the big money either, regardless. Obviously for a variety of reasons. But so I think to the actual question itself, like, are receivers becoming fungible, though? I think they're kind of moving in that direction because the cost is going up and because there's just so many receivers you can get. And if you don't want to pay a guy, you can't pay a guy, you just go draft somebody instead. That's going to be 100%. It's going to work out. But there's a lot of talent that you can find. Receivers year after year is becoming a deep, talented group of guys because there are so many great receivers in the spread offense college game. So
Well, that was going to be my next point. How much has the college game had the influence on it seeming this way?
Yeah, I think there has been an influence in that to some degree, but I also would say, I mean, these receivers are still getting paid just by different teams. Like the Raiders are paying, Devontae, and the Dolphins are paying Tyreek Hill. It's just different teams are paying that. But I think the Chiefs and the Packers are sitting there saying, it sucks to lose that guy. We didn't want to lose that guy, but we know we got an elite quarterback. That's the first thing that matters. And there's so many good receivers. Well, that receiver we take in round 1, round 2 will be made to look even better because they got Hall of Famers thrown to them.
All right. Positionally, wide receivers, is that of all positions, both maybe outside of offensive line? Let's throw out offensive line and defensive line. But everything else under the sun is on the table here, both sides of football. Is wide receiver the easiest position to take a kid from the draft and get him on the field contributing right away?
I think a short answer to that would be yes, but I don't think anything's easy to do. I know what you're saying. What's the easiest of the positions? Well, I would say running back. No, I would say running back's the easiest one to put on the field right away.
And we know how fungible that is.
Yeah. But there's a lot of misses on receivers too, because I think receivers can be tough to evaluate because they see so much free coverage, so much space in college. There's no press, or there's very little press. These guys are running free. They don't have to work on the releases. Just a lot of space in the NFL, and not a lot of great corners in college football either. And so it can make the evaluation muddier because the way that these guys play in college, that picture is going to be a lot different in terms of post-snap rotations, in terms of coverages, in terms of just the overall talent, in terms of facing press and things like that. It can make that evaluation actually tough.
I will also add this too. I think receivers now have become, as time goes on, more specialized in how their skill sets are valued. We talk a lot about how a player, a lot more now than 2008 when I started the site of, okay, X, he's more of an X trait guy, or this one more of a Z trait guy, or this one more as a slot. How many times do you see receivers that you think, oh, well, this guy can play the X and the Z and the F if need be. And are those the guys that end up being the ones that end up with the $20 million a year contracts now?
You're saying the guys that are versatile are the ones who end up?
Right. The more versatile, really coming out in general, because they're look, I think Danny Gray's an interesting subject. I hate to get down the rabbit hole here, but to me, Danny Gray is a guy that I wonder, and I didn't our own Tom Mead break him down. I think was the one that broke him down. He is a guy that I think played. I mean, we got to actually see him do quite a bit of X and Z and even some slot at the college level. And whereas some of these kids, a lot of these kids coming out is, he's more of a slot guy, or he's more of his route running, kind of limits him to being more of a Z stretch to field guy, or this guy's more of a, just running those inside slants all day long. So is it maybe because the ones that are more, because Deontay Johnson, in fact, and I've said this really since his rookie season with him, yes, he's an X primarily. Yes, his tape is fantastic getting off the line. In fact, you go back to his Toledo tape, right? That's one of the things that stuck out with him was his get off, and that's where probably a lot of people missed on him. And instead of having, a lot of people had him, I think, 5th, 6th round guy, and
right.
and here he is getting drafted, early in this thing. He's also shown I thought during his rookie season there, his ability to stretch the field vertically, and he still has done that. Now, it'll be an interesting case study, I think, with the Steelers specifically. Now, yeah, he does have the drop problem, and that's one of the biggest knocks on him, I think, at this point, is how the Steelers treat him this offseason, because it's not going to be a cap issue. You're not going to be able to point to the cap issue as a reason why you can't extend a guy like that. I mean, if there has been one well-rounded wide receiver since AB, it's him, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's been mostly the X, but I get what you're saying. I mean, to kind of bring it back to your question about are there really talented guys the most versatile? I think certainly they can be, but I think it's just kind of natural of good football players. The better football player you are, the more hats you wear, the more athletic you are, the more you can kind of move around. And sometimes offenses want to move you around more because they want to create different looks and they don't want to have you in one spot because it's even harder for defenses to take away a guy who can move around a ton. I just think about like the best high school athlete, the best guy on your high school football team was always played multiple positions. You know, in my school, the guy was like the quarterback, the punter, the lockdown safety. Like that
you
was
were
the
that
best
guy,
team.
weren't you?
I was that guy in my dreams, and I woke up. I was not me. So I just think whenever you're a really athletic guy, usually you kind of have more versatility because other guys just simply aren't good enough to play other positions. But I think in the NFL, the top guys generally kind of play that X receiver spot. They're the 3-by-1 backside guy. They're the ones that defenses have to roll coverage to or try to bank on playing you one-on-one. And that's where you kind of really create your value and create your money. I think the last thing on receivers and the kind of the changing philosophy of the position is the conversation you and Devin had earlier about the smaller receivers, the Tutu Atwells, the Devin Tompkins. I think the way the NFL has gone has become a more horizontal game. Kevin Colbert's acknowledged that. And so you don't necessarily need the guys that are 6 foot plus that can go up there and run vertically and win jump balls and stuff like that. There's still value in that. If you're a 6'4" guy, you can run, you're going to get drafted and get paid. But I think teams are more open to these smaller guys, the Calvin Austins, the Atwells, because there's more horizontal space, whether that's the RPO game, the screen game, 4-by-1 formation, stuff like that. And so you can be a small guy and still be schemed up a bit more, but you'll still be drafted highly because you can win in space. So Rondell Moore is a good example of that.
Right. And the duty for now in the offense with offensive coordinators, the better ones find a way to get those guys the ball in space.
Right. Yeah. Pre-snap motion, big thing in the NFL that's really come up. You get those guys in space on jets and flats and just return motion, stuff like that. So those little guys that are kind of schemed up more, you have to kind of create ways for them to win, but they can win. And that's why teams, I think, are more willing to draft these smaller receivers, the top 50 picks. Now,
I will say this, going back to finishing on Deontay Johnson real quick. One of the areas that has concerned me the most with him outside of the obvious and the drop issues he's had is I'm not so sure how much he likes those short slant routes and all, and working towards the middle of the field. He seems to be one of those footstep guys. So that's one of the rest of his game. I mean, really can get off the line and really run any route, I think, and can stretch the field vertically for this team, and a guy that you can get the screen game out into. You can even use him in motion, and get him the ball that way occasionally if you have to. So once again, I think it's going to be an interesting case study. I mean, you don't view him as a huge character concern guy, right?
Not at all. I think his character is great. I don't know if anyone has ever questioned his character or integrity. I think he's a hard worker. I think he worked his butt off crazy this year to have a really good season still.
So, and I mean, the drops you can tolerate if they're putting up big plays, right? To some degree.
Yeah. The drops weren't an issue to the very last month of the season. And that was an issue then, but he was solving that issue. I think it just moved with the length of the season. I think that Pro Bowl snub might have maybe got in his head a little bit and just kind of stacked some bad plays. So there's work to do there, but overall, I think Deontay had a great 2021 season.
All right, and back to him, and our constant ongoing discussion is why wouldn't they extend him at $20 million?
We'll see. If not, then it goes back to maybe that fungibility of it. Like I said, I think this will be a really good case study, as you mentioned, for kind of the philosophy of it. But also, will it be Colbert making that decision? I mean, there'll be a new GM, I assume, making that decision this summer. So will a new GM have a different philosophy on what he wants to do with Deontay? I mean, so it may almost be a moot point about what Colbert thinks, because Colbert probably won't be in that negotiation conversation when the time comes.
Okay. Well, we hammered that question pretty hard there. Let me see if I've got something else in here real quick. Let's see, that one was from Daniel. Here's one from Charles Munger. Dave, the USL must listen to the podcast. No sticks and change to measure for first downs there. Yeah, I kind of doubt they're listening to this show here. But Yeah, point taken. I was glad to see that for sure. And let me see if I can find maybe one more here. I think we've hit pretty much all of them overall here, worth getting to here, Alex. So with that, once again, shout out to Devin Jackson and Owen Straley, a couple of longer, or getting into longer term contributors with Steelers Depot and all. Always a pleasure to have them on. They both are constantly in the film as well too, and I'm sure both of them will have a couple more player profiles here before in the next 15 days overall here. So appreciate all the people we've had on these round tables in total. I think they've made for some very I've learned a lot from them, and I'm sure you have as well too, and talking about a lot of these different prospects here. And I think this has been a great segment of the show to kind of start winding down the pre-draft process there. So within that, you can follow Alex on the Twitter machine at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. Follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. You want an ad-free version, go to SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button. Also, if you like to make a donation to the site, go to SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button, upright navigation bar as well too. Alex, what are we going to talk about on Friday? I'm sure there'll be something come up. So in the meantime, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.